Prosecutors announced they're seeking over 11 years in prison for Diddy. All right. So if we look at the introduction, I could have went and pulled the whole paperwork, but it's pretty much summarized well here enough so we could take a look at this. This was filed yesterday. Introduction. Throughout this case and over the course of a 7-week trial, this court has seen extensive evidence demonstrating the defendant's criminal conduct perpetrated across more than a decade. At trial, the defendant disputed that the government had made out particular elements of the charged federal offenses, but he largely conceded his conduct, the violence, the domestic abuse, drug use and distribution, and bribery. The defendant will not be punished for any crimes of which he was acquitted, of course, but punishment for his crimes of conviction must take into account the manner in which he committed them. So don't just talk to me about the Mann Act. Talk to me about all the elements around this Mann Act and what he was really up to while he was breaking these laws. It's like a way of saying we're not trying to argue for the stuff that he was acquitted on, but we still want you to look at it, Judge. Right? That's like they kind of like just snuck that in on the low. All right. His crimes of conviction are serious and have warranted sentences over 10 years in multiple cases for defendants who, like Sean Combs, engaged in violence and put others in fear. Consistent with those cases and based on the corroborated evidence presented at trial, the court should impose a sentence of no less than 135 months, there goes your 11 years, of imprisonment. A substantial term of imprisonment is also needed in this case because the defendant is unrepentant. Okay. Incredibly, while the defendant conceded his acts of violence and abuse throughout trial, he now argues that his victim should shoulder the blame. Well, he had to. Remember, that's how they came out day one. They had to claim some of his faults and some of his wrongs because the Cassie video was in everybody's face. All right. The defendant tries to recast decades of abuse as simply the function of mutually toxic relationships. But there is nothing mutual about a relationship where one person holds all the power and the other ends up bloodied and bruised. So the mutual argument from Diddy's side, and I ain't sticking up for him, but the mutual argument was the consent. That was the biggest word of the whole trial. Consenting adults. For example, Dawn Rashad, you had all these ugly things to say in some of your testimony of eyewitness accounts of things that happened of domestic abuse, but then they show you coming back later on trying to re-up for another deal with Diddy. Same thing with Cassie. You know, there's emails and text messages that show when you were enjoying the lavish life, getting gifted on all these vacations, setting up freak offs, you know, so, and it doesn't justify Diddy being the piece of shit person that he was being. I'm just saying, I don't expect the prosecution to outline that piece here because they're the ones that's pushing the judge to like, no, push this shit out. We hear about this Nino Brown ass 1 year shit that people talking about. No, we want 11. All right. So that's, I guess, the bulk of the prosecution side. Cassie comes in. There's one thing about that coin flip. Most people like to go second. Closing argument, last impression, last word. Last week, we saw Diddy's team come out and they had a pretty good presentation to the judge. They broke down, it looked like 100 plus cases and the outcomes that were relevant to Diddy's charges and showed, you know, the probation and 12 months and time served. And, you know, we didn't see too much 11-year sentences from all that stuff that they outlined. And then he also presented a whole bunch of people speaking on his behalf for him. I think Miss Miami was one of them, right? People that was sending in a lot of letters for him. They collected all that, presented that to the judge. Now here we are, Wednesday, so 2 days away from his sentencing because it's happening Friday, and the prosecution side comes. They come with the reminder of why he should have this 11 years, how much he's damaged other people, how he already admitted to all the violent acts, etc. And we have our star witnesses letter, which should trump. That's like the Joker in the deck. Don't tell me about Miss Miami. She wasn't on the stand. Don't tell me about his homeboy that made a beat or two for him that's saying, hey, Diddy's a great guy. He wasn't in the trial. We got the star witness And let's see what she's going to say. Ooh, Cassie, shit. All right. This is a couple pages. Obviously, I don't think we need to read all of this, but all right. Dear Judge, what's the name? Arun. I hate trying to pronounce his last name. I have been in a cycle of thought and then over the thought writing this letter to you. If there is one thing I have learned from this experience, it is the victims and survivors will never be safe. Although I can hope for justice and accountability, I have come to not trust anything. I hope that your decision considers the truths at hand and the jury failed to see, or that the jury failed to see. So we're seeing multiple people, including your Joker, Cassie, your star witness, coming out and saying or enforcing it's not just about the past. And yes, I'm no longer with the man. I have a whole family and husband over here now. We're not together anymore, but I'm still in danger. They're trying to present the power of Diddy. I think it'd be stupid to come out and try to seek any form of revenge at all, even down to a tweet if you're Diddy. I'm not trying to say, Cassie, calm down. Ain't nobody on your heels when Diddy comes home. Who am I to make that judgment? I don't know Diddy like that. I don't know how vengeful he is. But I don't know if they're releasing Jeffrey Dahmer back out into the world. That's me being fair, both sides of the perspective. For 4 days in May, while 9 months pregnant with my son, I testified in front of a packed courtroom about the most traumatic and horrifying chapter in my life. I testified that from age 19, Sean put that teenage year in there, huh? Sean Combs used violence, threats, substances, and control over my career to trap me in over a decade of abuse. Once again, showing angle that it's not consensual. If you're talking about drugs, if you're talking about entrapment, because my career, abuse, physical, it's I didn't do all this consensually. Okay. So she's trying to reinforce that once again. He groomed me. Ooh, big word. Into performing repeated sex acts with hired male sex workers during multi-day freak-offs, which occurred nearly weekly. Yeah, when we heard that during the trial, we was like, who's not getting sexed out during all of this shit? Like 90 plus hour, like the fuck? Like it's damn. Like go to sleep or something. Which occurred nearly weekly. I was forced into lingerie and heels, told exactly how to look, and plied with drugs and alcohol so he can keep control of me like a puppet. These events were degrading and disgusting, leaving me with infections, illnesses, and days of physical and emotional exhaustion before he demanded it all again. Sex acts became my full time job, used as the only way to stay in his good graces. How's that for an opening from Cassie? Let me skim this next pieces. I testified that I learned to read Sean Combs' signals. Oh, this might be important. Learn to read Combs' signals, knowing that when I spoke of freak offs, he was demanding them, and the refusing meant punishment. Losing my car, my phone, or worse. He controlled every part of my livelihood and threatened to destroy my reputation by leaking sex. Yeah, we heard about that with her parents too, right? Leaking sex tapes and a threat he repeated often. His power over me eroded my independence and sense of self until I felt I had no choice but to submit. When he believed I had wronged him or was not sufficiently responsive, he also threatened people around me and those close to me, including my family. I regularly worried that displeasing him meant putting my family and friends' safety at risk. You talk about entrapment or forceful nature. Her explanation here totally erases the word consent, because let's be mature about this, people. Saying yes to something, right, doesn't just constitute consent. I read the text message and Cassie said, "Hey babe, what's up? Sure, let's do the freak off. I can't wait to see you. Looking forward to tonight." That seems pretty consensual when you read it like that. But all the context and circumstances around it is like, yeah, I'm texting this because I know if I don't, my parents, my friends, my career, my phone, my car, my house, uh, my body, all of this stuff is at stake. I still shall remain. Diddy is a piece of shit. And it's not because of what I'm reading right here. I just seen enough, heard enough, and it's not just the Cassie stuff. I think he's a piece of shit person. I just felt like what they went at him with the Rico stuff seemed like they overshot their mark. Like, what are you guys going for here? Like the whole thing of it being federal instead of state and not going after domestic violence or abuse, right? The Rico stuff and trying to, anyway, we don't have to relive the trial. But he is a piece of shit person to me, in my opinion. And Cassie being the star witness coming out with a write-up such as this, let's close this out. Let me read that last piece. For over a decade, Sean Combs made me feel powerless and unimportant, but my experience was real, horrific, and deserves to be considered. While the jury did not seem to understand or believe that I engaged in freak-offs because of the force of coercion the defendant used against me, I know that is the truth. And his sentence should reflect the reality of the evidence of my lived experiences as a victim, reliving in detail the events and the truths described throughout the trial. And this letter causes me tremendous emotional pain. I am trying with all that I am to move on. I hope that your sentencing decision reflects the strength it took for victims of Sean Combs to come forward. I hope that your decision considers the many lives that Sean Combs has unpended with his abuse and control. I thank you for for your time and your attention, Cassandra Ventura. Fine. What's that? The other guy's last name? Now that she's married. Yeah. So, you definitely Diddy definitely deserves, whether true or not, alleged or not, he deserves to have the picture painted of, yeah, you've done a lot of good for people. You've helped a lot of people's careers. You help a lot of people make money, but you've also negatively impacted a lot of lives. And in this world, in this judicial system, in this country, in common karma and common human conduct, I'm not saying people are expected to be angels, but they're expected to do right and not try to balance that with the amount of wrongs. You're not supposed to, in America, be able to say, yeah, I beat the shit out of these 10 women over here, but these 20 guys over here I made millionaires. You're not supposed to be able to do that. You know? Um, I think this will be the last piece of coverage that we do until Friday. The actual sentencing, and court won't be open by the time we're here live. So we may come back after the sentencing verdict, or I shouldn't say verdict, after the sentencing decision comes down. All right. We may go live in the morning Friday, and then we'll keep our eye on the court. And the moment they say, all right, that's it, you're getting 1 year and you already served that, so go home. Or they say, we do listen to the prosecution and we did look over some of this casework. We do deem you powerful and dangerous. And this Cassie shit is a big trump card. Yeah, we're going to give you 8 years. Regardless, maybe we'll just go live as soon as the sentencing comes down. We'll see.